the Office of the Presidential Advisor on the Peace Process, headed by Secretary Ging Deles, as well as the entire OPAP family. If you have a presentation, ma'am,
Yes.
you may proceed at magandang hapon po sa inyo.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Can we have the presentation?
Same provision found in 2014. Ma'am, ready? Please proceed. Wala pa.
Wala pa. But I guess we can begin.
Please, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. Our presentation first presents our agency mandate, some updates on the peace process, which I can go through very quickly, and what we expect in 2014 and 2015, and then we go to the details of our proposed budget. So as you may know, Your Honor, the mandate of OPAP is the management of the comprehensive peace process, and it has the authority to coordinate and integrate on behalf of the President all existing peace efforts. We have only one MFO, Your Honor, that this is to provide technical advisory and support services on the comprehensive peace process. Just to go very quickly on the updates of where we are now, because Your Honor, we are managing several peace tables in pursuit of the President's agenda to end all internal armed conflict. The major milestone that was achieved this year, but has been the effort of the last years, is the completion and signing of the comprehensive agreement on the Bangsamoro last March 27. And with regard the MILF peace process, just last week, the President turned over the draft Bangsamoro Basic Law to Congress. We have established the mechanisms for the implementation of the CAB, particularly with regard the normalization annex, which will not be part of the law. And we have already started socio-economic development of Bangsamoro communities through the Sadyahatra Bangsamoro program. But we have other peace tables, Your Honor. With the MNLF, while the tripartite review process was aborted last year due to the Zamboanga siege that was carried out by forces close to Chair Miswari, we have continued to advocate with the OIC and its member countries for the completion of the review process. And here at home, parallel to that is a continued engagement with the MNLF leadership to participate in the Bangsamoro peace process, and we understand, for example, that there are some MNLF leaders that are prepared to join the consultations on the Bangsamoro Basic Law. And again, a big part is the continued provision of socio-economic programs in communities with MNLF presence, which already includes a community security management program, so that we're also talking about the turnover of their weapons, the communities that are being developed. With regard the GPH, CPP, NPA, and the peace process, there has been an impasse since February 2011, but the search for a new framework continues, and we have sustained engagements, particularly through Friends of the Process, on how to move the peace table forward. Again, there is continued provision of socioeconomic programs in conflict-affected areas. And then we have two closure tables, Your Honor. One with the CBA-CPLA, where we signed an agreement on July 4, 2011. And this is already well in its way of implementation, which includes the turnover of firearms, the integration of some of them in the AFP, economic integration as forest guards, and through community development projects under the CDED of DSWD. They have already been, the CPLA has already registered itself as under the SEC as the Cordillera People's Forum for Peace and Development. Um, and that is ongoing, and we are working to complete this by next year so that there will be no more CPLA. And then a closure document is being prepared for signing with the RPMP, RPA, ABB. And again, there is attached community-based projects in the, which is the parallel program to what is happening on the peace table. As you may know, Your Honor, aside from taking care of what we call Track 1, which are the peace tables, OPAP has oversight over PAMANA, which is our way of making sure that government is felt in conflict-affected areas, that we don't win the peace just on the table, but also on the ground. And there are several PAMANA accomplishments, and this is a continuing program. So in 2014 and 2015, we expect the implementation of the MILF, the implementation of the CAB to proceed. So there is the political track with the anticipated passage of the Bangsamoro Basic Law, which will be followed by the plebiscite and therefore the creation and the establishment of the Bangsamoro Transition Authority. We expect all of that to happen within 2015 in preparation for elections in 2016. In terms of normalization, the decommissioning of MILF combatants will also be starting. In fact, this year, we are looking at the turnover, the first batch of crew-served and high-powered weapons within this year. In line with that, there are the socio-economic development programs. We are now working with the MILF on that. And there will be a Philippine Development Forum on the Bangsamoro, even to invite international ODA to assist in the socio-economic development of the projected Bangsamoro. There are confidence-building measures that are anticipated with the transformation of the 6 recognized MILF camps. And finally, there is transitional justice and reconciliation with recommendations to be handed forward by an independent transitional justice body, and eventually amnesty before this process is ended. While with the CPP, NPA, NDF, we hope to be able to achieve some consensus on the negotiating framework of the peace tables, while the closure processes with the MNLF, the review of the final peace agreement 1996, and then the closure agreements with the CBA, CPLA, and the RPMP, RPA, ABB, we hope to be able to proceed in 2015 up to 2016. So that is the work that is in front of us, Your Honor, and so we put forward this budget proposal as part of the GAA. As noted earlier, we only have one MFO, and there are 3 categories under our budget: the general administration and support services, operations, and the new thing in our budget, Your Honor, is the locally funded program to cover implementation of normalization agreements. It will come out to a total of 582,280,000. We are ready to provide some details on all of these. Under the general administration and support services, we have the executive offices, the planning and monitoring, the policy work, communications, knowledge management, and the implementation of our commitment to UN Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace, and security. That amounts to 139,026,000, Your Honor. With operations, this covers our different secretariats as well as the panels, operations, We have two panels, the one with the MILF and the other one with the CPP, NPA, NDF, and uh, all of the closure tables, including the MNLF, are directly handled by OPAP staff. So we have the secretariat for the for the talks with the MILF, and it also includes the security arrangements under the GPH MILF agreement, which now covers the international monitoring team, a joint coordinating committee on the cessation of hostilities. We have a ceasefire that has been well in place since 2012, and an ad hoc joint action group. This is the body where the MILF commits to cooperate with government in the interdiction of lawless elements in MILF areas. As well, there is a secretariat or staff working on the MNLF peace process, the CPP, NPA, NDF, and the closure agreements with the CPLA as well as the RPMP, RPA, ABB. And we have an oversight work and monitoring work for PAMANA and CLIP, the Comprehensive Local Integration Program for former combatants. The new, as I had mentioned earlier, the new item in our budget is the locally funded program on normalization, and that has amounts allocated in support of the development of the 6 identified MILF camps. This is a confidence building measure that was agreed upon and provides a low-hanging fruit for development in MILF areas. There are several joint normalization bodies that are set up already. That includes the Joint Normalization Committee, the Internal Peace and Security Committees, and well, some of the other bodies are with foreign assistance and support. And then we have the Sadyahatra Bangsamoro Joint Committee. There is an amount for information and advocacy because it is very important that on the ground the people well understand the process. It is also a public advocacy on the national level because we would like the entire Filipino public to be accompanying the process of the passage of the Bangsamoro Basic Law. Because we have no regional offices, Your Honor, we are setting up an office in Cotabato because there are now so many elements under the peace process, both in terms of security and socio-economic development that now has to be done with a full-time dedicated staff in Cotabato. And for this, there is some capital outlay that is given. If we compare the budget for 2014 and 2015, except for the locally funded program, there is very little upward movement, maybe about 3 million. So not general administration and support services as well as operations pretty much lie in the same level. It is the locally funded program on normalization that puts up our budget for the coming year. We have a comparison of the PS, the MOE, and the CO for all of the main items, the general administration and support services, operations, and the locally funded program, which leads to a total of 84,932,000 for PS, 489,528,000 for MOE, and 7,820,000 for the capital outlay, or an allocation of 15% for personnel services, 84% for MOE, and 1% for capital outlay. Aside from that, as part of the normalization program, there are already the socioeconomic programs that are amounts of which are lodged in different national agencies like such as DepEd, TESDA, Philippine Health, PhilHealth, CHED, DA, and DSWD. The amount that puts an amount of 2,462,283,764 pesos, Your Honor. And these are all identified. It is based on the estimated number to be decommissioned in the MILF in the coming year. As well, we just provide a listing of the Pamana programs in different parts of the provinces. This money is not lodged with OPAP. It works in 47 provinces, 4 chartered cities, and 314 municipalities, or a total of 3,812 barangays, along 7 conflict zones. That's the CPLA, the RPMP, RPA, ABB, the MNLF, or the Bangsamoro, MNLF and MILF, and the 3 conflict zones for the CPP, NPA, NDF. And there is a listing of the amounts that are lodged with the different agencies, and it is part of their GAA allocation, Your Honor. That is all, Your Honor.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, just a few questions on the BBL. The more proper forum for that would be on the floor, but just a few points and questions. First, ano ho ba nangyari noon? Bakit wala pa naman yung MILF po noon, di ba? Nung nakikipag-usap tayo sa MNLF, it was only the MNLF that was there, right? Ma'am.
In 1996, but the MILF came into in the 1980s. They had already separated. What they did was that they
Pero maliit lang yung MILF noon.
well, they waited it out. They watched the negotiations with the MNLF, and their position then had been if the MNLF agreement would go well and the implementation
They
would go
joined.
well, then tapos na sila.
In terms of forces, ilan po ang MNLF at ilan po ang MILF at that time?
At that time.
Because I presume that we talked to the MNLF because they were bigger in numbers. Otherwise, we would have talked to the MILF. 30,000 po, Attorney Lorena, sir?
Yes, sir. Based on the discussion during the 1996 negotiation, the MNLF pegged the MILF forces at 30,000.
No, ilan po yung MNLF?
Ang MNLF at that time was bumaba sa 22 at that time.
Ang MILF was 8,000? The
That
balance?
was the estimate of Chairman Normis Suarez at that time, sir.
At the time. Now, after the agreement was entered into, ARM was created, all of a sudden you had a resurrected MILF, and the estimated number of MILF, the reason why we're talking to them right now is how many, ma'am?
The regular forces is put at 12,000, but including militia and auxiliary forces are around, the number now is around 30,000.
So, medyo matanda na rin ako nun, pa-congressman pala ako ng 1998. I remember that almost overnight, MILF became a force to reckon with. And the logical deduction would be that most of the forces of the MNLF were not happy with what their leaders did, joined the MILF. Is that a reasonable or a fair assessment of what happened at that time?
I
Attorney
think
Lorena, sir?
yes, precisely. Both the separation of the MNLF and the MILF was both ideological and at the same time leadership.
So, is it fair to say nga ho, na after the peace agreement with the MNLF was entered into, a big chunk of the numbers of the MILF, which practically sprung overnight in terms of numbers, came from the ranks of the MNLF?
It is safe, sir, because many of them come also to batch 300 of the MNLF.
Ma'am?
But it had maybe some historical context to that.
Please, ma'am.
The MILF started to grow in the in the mid 80s to the 90s onwards when it formally broke away from the MNLF. And if you remember, it was Hashim Salamat who came home during this time, during martial law, whereas Normie Suarez stayed abroad. He did not return until the mid-1980s. But otherwise, it was the MILF that was already growing by the time of the 1990s.
But why did we talk to the peace agreement with the MNLF was entered into in the mid-90s?
After the 86...
The first agreement was in 1976.
Tripoli pa yun.
And then during the time of President Corazon Aquino, they attempted to negotiate, but that did not prosper, and it was resumed in 1992 by President Ramos.
MNLF lang to.
MNLF lang po.
But
And
if the
then-
MILF was growing already at that time, why were they not, they were simply bystanders, why were they not pulled into the negotiating table?
I understand that the MILF wanted to be included in the negotiations in 1986 during the time of President Aquino, but the policy decision at the time was to talk only to the MNLF.
Looking back, ma'am, was the peace agreement with the MNLF a failed proposition? Is that why we're changing the regime in ARMM now? Because it did not work?
Well, there is both the the gaps in terms of the conceptualization of the arm, but maybe more important was the implementation was never really pursued. Even the based on the 1996 agreement, the expanded arm law should have been passed in 1998, and it was done only in 2001. As well, we know that under the governance of Governor Miswari, because he immediately assumed position, that the development of the areas did not happen, and so the communities did not feel the peace dividend of the 1996 final peace
So
agreement.
it failed for whatever reason.
Yes.
That's why, is it fair to say that we are now replacing that regime with this new regime as provided for by the BBL?
Certainly, Your Honor, and considering the time gap also, there is greater understanding of what is needed in a truly autonomous, truly autonomous government. For example, the strengthening of the fiscal autonomy provisions, plus the sharpening of the delineation of the different powers, as well as looking into the regional security situation and the strengthening of the justice system with the Sharia. These are gaps that were not seen as well in 1996.
I think roughly, ma'am, you know where I'm headed towards. I'll cut it short by simply asking this. Sa kalagitnaan ng pakikipag-usap natin sa MILF, nagdesisyon si Ms. Waring ng manggulo, naapektuhan ng Zamboanga, ilang residente ang naapektuhan, presidente mismo kailangan pa magpunta ron. Habang nakikipag-usap tayo sa MILF, nag-breakaway na rin ang BIFF. Tama ba? O BFF? BIFF. Ang BIFF. At meron din silang mga ilan, Attorney Lorena, mga ilan ng BIFF? May 1,000? Mahigit?
The estimate of the AFP is within that range, sir.
May 1,000. Actually, the question, ma'am, is, what's our guarantee na hindi mauubos yung pinamimigay natin dyan sa ARMM to another group, only for another group to spring alive and all of a sudden create havoc there and force government to again talk to them. Again, we've seen this happen with MNLF, ngayon with MILF. How confident or hopeful are you na hindi ito mangyayari sa BIFF o MNLF uli?
That is why, Your Honor, when the President, when we reconstituted the panel, the negotiating panel in 2010, the President's instructions were very clear, learn the lessons from the past. And among these are the way we had proceeded in terms of the drafting of the law. That is why here, because this was a major complaint of the MNLF. They were not really engaged in the drafting of RA 9054. Therefore, even before it was passed, there were already MNLF that said that's not ours.
So we did that with MILF.
We did that.
How will we
did that
address-
here. We are also, and I think this will also explain why the President in our roadmap now, we finish and install the new government by 2016 because implementation is very
Sige, ma'am.
important.
Quite possibly, we're doing it right now, learning from our past mistakes with the MILF, but how will you address the MNLF and BIFF groups? Since MILF lang ang kinausap natin, are all of these groups considered already bandits and terrorists and should therefore be either arrested or if they fight, be engaged by our military forces?
With regard the MNLF, in fact, the effort in the tripartite review continues, and even though that has been suspended, we are talking to senior MNLF leaders to participate in the crafting of the BBL, and that is why you will note that there are several MNLF leaders that are preparing to come to the consultations and be part of this process, and we are envisioning that when the Bangsamoro Transition Authority is set up, that there could be MNLF there.
So sinasama sila doon.
Sinasama.
What about BIFF, ma'am?
Your Honor, the BIFF, the agenda is for an Islamic state. And they
So-
so it's something that we cannot possibly allow in our constitution. And if they continue to use violence as they have been doing, attacking our military installations, then they are basically a law enforcement issue.
And we can say, Your Honor, that in fact, the BIFF has been well contained, and that we know that there are members of the communities that are also assisting already the AFP in the fighting of the BIFF. They are giving warnings here. We are doing the Pamana projects, the Sajahatra Bangsamoro projects are also part of this attempt. We have Pamana specifically for MNLF so that the communities that still hold weapons are developed with an understanding that there will be a community security management arrangement that will be put into place. And so we are also looking at in the near future that there will be some turnover of guns in a less formal and structured, less high-profile way, also with MNLF communities. We are now going directly to MNLF communities and talking to them and explaining what government is trying to do.
BIFF muna tayo, ma'am. Baka mauna pa ang Amerika na i-declare yan na FTO. Tapos sa sarili nating bansa, you're not yet there, as you said. As you said, Chairperson Colonel, if they continue, then it will be a law enforcement problem. How do we view the BIFF right now? So they're bandits, they're criminals.
There are international foreign terrorist groups like the Jemaah Islamiyah that find sanctuary in some of their areas of influence, and these are the groups that are internationally listed. But the BIFF right now is still a local organization.
How do you classify that local organization? It's hindi naman sa criminal syndicate.
It's an armed group that
It's an armed group that is
that
a
is
law
in
enforcement
hostility.
problem. In other words, we are not doing peace talks with
So
them.
it's a private armed group. Actually, I raised this question. I'll leave this point. Alam niyo, sara na yung pinto. Kasi the longer you delay in how you treat them, classify them, or consider them, they might graduate and elevate and mature to becoming something like either the MNLF or the MILF. And at some point down the road, you might not even be in government anymore. The next government or the next government will now be faced with negotiations with them for another basic law.
I think, Your Honor, in fact, that is already the AFP position. That is why you will note earlier this year, or was it late last year, when there was a major assault on their areas.
I prefer that it be the position of the government and not only the AFP.
Oh yes. That is well consulted with the civilian.
Because
Yes,
I know
yes,
for
Your
a
Honor.
fact that debates happened in the past between OPAP, your predecessors, and the AFP on how these matters will be treated and viewed.
We agree on this, Your Honor. It is a law enforcement problem. They are not allowed movement, and they have warrants of arrest on them, and it notes our appreciation of the fact that even the communities surrounding them are already providing information to our armed forces.
And any
about the
offensives
movements
against
there.
them will not affect the ongoing
No.
talks or the crafting of the BBL.
In fact, the MILF has also been assisting already.
Now, if I may proceed to your budget, ma'am. First point, I'm on page, I don't know if you have a copy, 1064. Ma'am, this requires you to submit quarterly reports on the Pamana which you oversee. In the previous budget, 2014, for this year, you were required to submit monthly reports and not quarterly reports. May I know if you have been complying with that? Louis?
Yes, Your Honor, that we have been very much in touch with the different line agencies, and we do require them to submit monthly reports, and we forward all of them to our oversight bodies.
May copy ba tayo? We only have an annual report, which you submit as part of your annual report, but we haven't been getting monthly or quarterly reports.
Honor, we will, if in case the Senate still doesn't have a copy of those monthly reports, we will provide them.
No, you're required to submit it to the Senate, actually,
Yes.
to the House Committee on Appropriations and to the Senate Committee on Finance. If there is a faux pas between the receiving entities here in the Senate, kindly furnish us with copies of the received copies that you have, if indeed you have been submitting.
We'll check on that, Your Honor, and if the failure was on our part, we will do a catch up and henceforth be submitting every report that we submit to the Office of the President will also be submitted
Thank you, ma'am.
to the Senate.
Now, you have a 228 allocation under locally funded project, as you said, for normalization. This is, ma'am, on top of the 2.4 billion normalization fund lodged in the different agencies.
Yes.
Can you give us an itemized listing of the 228? I presume you already have that. Saan pupunta? Anong gagawin?
Yes, Your Honor. In fact, I had done a presentation. It is for there is 10 million for each of the 6
Camps?
camps. There is the amounts for the creation of the joint normalization bodies. There is communications and advocacy, which includes both the making sure there are materials on the ground that are going out, and that, for example, the AFP and our other agencies have information that they can help to bring down to the ground. And then finally, there is the setting up of a Cotabato office.
Kindly submit that to us, ma'am, as well as the capital outlay of 7.82 million. Ano po ba tong 7? Ito yung sa office?
Yes, kasi we have no regional offices, Your Honor, so it's really what we have. We've been renting small offices for the CCCH and all of that, and we are now putting all of that together.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, just for my enlightenment, ma'am, what's the difference between the normalization process per agency allocation under NEP and the Pamana under the NEP? What distinguishes one from the other?
Well, the normalization is specific to the MILF because this will refer to actual combatants that are being decommissioned. So there is, in fact, for some of the programs, there is a one-on-one account in terms of PhilHealth, etc. That every combatant.
And the Pamana is
Pamana covers all the other conflict zones.
all the others. So, hindi na
Yes.
kasama ang MILF sa Pamana.
Yeah, oo. Hindi, they did not want Pamana then. They only opened up to socio-economic development when we signed the framework agreement. So we have the Sadyahatra Bangsamoro and now this.
How many MILF combatants are there again?
Together with the number that they have given us and which our AFP has validated as having basis is around 30,000. That includes the militias and auxiliary forces.
No exact amount, ma'am?
For validation.
For 30, yes. But they will be in the process of normalization, Your Honor. There will be an independent decommissioning body where names will be given. They will be verified. Their weapons will be listed, and this will be verified by an independent decommissioning
I'll
body.
give you an example, ma'am. Under PhilHealth, you only appropriated 50,400,000 at 2,400 per PhilHealth beneficiary. That's only 21,000 na mako-cover ng PhilHealth. If you indeed want to cover 30,000, it should be 72 million.
The normalization will go up to 2016, Your Honor. So we are only allocating for 2015 because the decommissioning is phased depending on the political process as well. So the decommissioning will go up to just before elections when they've seen that everything is already going well. We hope there will be an exit agreement, and that is when full decommissioning will happen because they know they cannot run a political party in the
But
elections.
PhilHealth coverage can come ahead.
Yeah, some are being covered already by Sadyahatra. In fact, with the MILF, in fact, with PhilHealth, this already started in 2013. In 2013, we
My point,
already have
ma'am, is
60,000. We already have how many MI? MI in PhilHealth? Yeah. 11,000. We already have 11,000 for this year.
is it a matter of implementation or funding?
Funding and implementation because they give the names, Your Honor.
But if we can give you the funding, can you provide the names and the people?
They're all verified. They get.
No, because alam nyo, ang laki ng pinapropose ng PhilHealth eh. PhilHealth is asking for over 35 billion for 2015. The NHTS coverage is only at 5 million. If you divide 35 billion by 2,400, you're talking of 15 million beneficiaries or persons covered by PhilHealth. At that amount, I don't even think they can do it. I don't even think they can absorb it. That's why for the proposed budget of 2015, we are including barangay officials already and employees dahil sobra-sobra naman eh. Now, insofar as you are concerned, that's why I'm asking, kung kaya niyong pangalanan, if you can absorb it,
That's we already have an arrangement with PhilHealth that when there is when there are more beneficiaries that are ready, that is beyond the allocation, then
because we can
they will
provide for a ceiling amount and availment will depend on the availability of the names in the special provisions in the budget of PhilHealth to cover particularly the normalization process.
Your Honor, we
Ma'am?
expect them to provide us with the list of names of combatants within this year. And we also have other mechanisms like the Joint Peace and Security Teams that will be made up for the first batch of around 700 MILF members, and they will also be provided with PhilHealth cards.
So yes, Your Honor. The PhilHealth card, in fact, is very popular with the rebel groups.
So let us know, ma'am. Let us know if you have a rough figure before we go to plenary by end of October. Now, next point, I think this is for Attorney Padilla. Ngayon ko lang nakitang CNN na pala yung CPP, NPA, NDF. CNN na pala ang tawag niyan. The sticky issue is the JASIG, right?
JASIG, then there's also the issue of the releases of their so-called consultants.
Yes.
So-
JASIG, and actually it's basically respect for the JASIG insofar as those who were arrested and are detained.
Opo.
You're talking about a total of about, if I'm not mistaken, about 15, but the non-negotiable is about 7 or 8.
Ang total JASIG list ho is around 84,
Yeah,
actually.
but correct me if I'm wrong.
Oo.
They're asking for about 8 or 17 people.
79, of which about 7 have already been
Kaya
released.
8 na lang.
Three or 4 of whom returned to the NPA, and that is why it has caused problems for us, Your Honor. We cannot be releasing people that go back to fight.
Agree, but is it even fair to say that we're expecting something before the end of the president's term? Or is it fair to say that the MILF is an achievement enough for OPAP and even for Pinoy, and we'll just sit this one out until the next administration?
We continue to look at the possibility of getting a modified political settlement, Your Honor.
But not at the top, not a top priority.
No, Your Honor, but development work is in the areas is however a top priority.
Which they consider actually
Counterinsurgency.
counterinsurgency.
Which is fine, Your Honor.
Precisely my point.
Our position is that that there is no held area.
So if that is being done already, so is it safe, is it fair to say nga na you are conducting developmental assistance in areas influenced, I'll use the word influenced, by the CPP, NPA, NDF? Talks right now are suspended at a standstill. There's an impasse. And it's not a high priority for talks to resume under the Aquino administration for now.
It's very clear, Your Honor. We will only resume talks if if we agree on a time-bound, agenda-bound framework.
Are there even proposals on the table?
There are friends of the process, Your Honor, who are exploring.
But no definite proposals na ito yung gusto namin,
In our mind, Your Honor, yes.
which has not been communicated to them.
I think some of our friends may be finding ways of communicating.
Fair enough, ma'am.
And when we are ready, Your Honor, certainly we will go public.
Again, I'll reserve the questions for BBL at a more appropriate venue. I'd refer you, ma'am, to page 1069 of your budget. Ang laki ng binaba nung non-permanent positions po ninyo from 84 million to 61 million. Why is this? Again, I'm referring to page 1069.
1069 is not our, is not. 1063, 64. Okay, that is not ours, Your Honor. 1069. 1069 is not OPAP, Your Honor.
What is it, ma'am? Ma'am, sa inyo pa yun. Pero ba't ito magkaiba?
Sa baba.
Sa baba nga pala.
Kasi sir, ito, dinistribute lang. This
Ah, okay. Sa inyo pa yun, ma'am? Sa inyo pa yun, ma'am? The total is still the same. Dinisaggregate lang niya. Tignan mo, ma'am, ang gulo-gulo talaga, oh. Now, extraordinary and miscellaneous expenses, 2.466 million. What is this for, ma'am? Saan po ginagastos ng 2 million na to?
Allowances for Plantilla. It's the allowed monthly allowances for Plantilla
Positions.
positions, yes, sir.
Now, professional services increased from 39,616 to 57,312.
Yes, Your Honor, because the reality is that OPAP is not seen as a permanent office. It is an office that foresees that at some point you will no longer.
So where does
need
this
it.
go, ma'am?
So some are covered by, especially since in the work, for example, of the negotiations, you have a lot of lawyers, a lot of technical people. So we contract.
Out of curiosity, do we pay for the technical people of the other panel?
The other side?
Yes, ma'am.
No, Your Honor.
Do we pay for anything that the other side is spending for this?
In the ceasefire arrangement, because they do joint operations, they do joint movements. Yes.
But that's under with the AFP or under OPAP.
Under there, it's under OPAP.
Under
So
OPAP.
it's part of our MOOE, Your Honor.
Now, the financial assistance / bar subsidy, 109 million. Same question, ma'am, as with the OP. In fact, mas malaki pa yung financial assistance at subsidy nyo kaysa sa OP. The OP only had 90 million. You have 109. May I know where this money came from? Where the amount came from? At bakit bitin? But 109?
Normalization, saan yun?
No, ma'am, financial assistance
It's
/
a
bar
socio-economic.
subsidy.
It's a socio-economic portion. Yun nasa normalization.
Yung 228? Yan po ba yung 228 nyo? Again, ma'am, forgive me, ang gulo ng presentation. Is this part of the 228?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes, Your Honor.
Nasaan po yung balanse ng 228 out of curiosity?
We can be.
No, where is it in the budget, ma'am?
In the locally funded.
No, nakalagay doon mami 228 but binreakdown nila by PS, MOE.
Yes.
Doon nga ako naguguluhan, ma'am. Binreakdown naman nila by PS, MOE, and CO.
Yes. So ito yung
Now, If-
Walang PS yung locally fund.
I know, ma'am. So, nasan yung balance ng 228?
I think, Your Honor, it's really a presentation problem. We are able to provide it per component, but at a certain point, DBM will have to disaggregate it by budget item, and this is what appears in the NEP.
That's what confused me, ma'am. I'll give you an example, ma'am. Yung 228 nyo is broken down by 220, 580 MOE, 7820 CO. Fine, I'm okay with that. But if they present it now by PS MOE and CO, sige, yung CO, nakalagay naman dyan 7820. Now, kung puro MOE, yung locally funded nyo at 225.80, and you say that 109 is part of 220, saang part ng MOE budget nyo yung balanse nung 220.580?
We will have to, because when we do submit to DBM, it's also by budget item, and we will have to look back into our submission to be able to identify per budget item the total of the 228, Your Honor.
The
So-
presentation here, Louis, is already MOE. Naka-breakdown na MOE. You're sure that 109 is part of 228? What about the remaining balance of the 220? Which item in your MOE will it be found? If it's normalization, correct me if I'm wrong,
Your Honor, because I think,
sabog-sabog na to.
yes, Your Honor, it already includes a regular MOE plus plus the locally funded program. Magkahalo na siya per budget item. So we'll need to be able to come up with a matrix that disaggregates both are of MOE and the locally funded according to the line item provided for in the next.
Actually, I roughly have it here. Traveling expenses of the 225.80, 32,268 out of the 123,410 traveling expenses. That's for the locally funded projects. Actually, magulo lang talaga, ma'am. Kahit kayo, naguguluhan eh. Ma'am, kindly submit that to us. And since Pamana is embedded in the in various departments na sabog-sabog, for our information as well, I'm sure, ma'am, you have a listing of this so that you can monitor it, diba? Can you give us, ma'am, kasi imbis na ikal namin from the various agencies, can you give us the listed projects for the 7,301,241,400? Yung butal na 400 para sa PhilHealth po yun, which will cover 19,001. Saan ang galing yun, ma'am? 19,001 beneficiaries. If you divide 47,762,400 by 2,400, you have 19,001 beneficiaries. Bakit? Saan galing yun?
So we'll need to refer back to our base document and provide you with that information.
Please, and also kung kulang to, ma'am, sabihin niyo na rin sa amin habang may fiscal space ang PhilHealth to be able to cover more beneficiaries. Kasi kung nahihirapan sila mag-identify through NHTS, then let's make it easier for them. Let's use the various offices like DILG for barangay officials or LGUs, like OPAP for MILF integrees or former combatants, and for other groups under the Pamana program. Submit that to us, ma'am, please, too. One last point, ma'am, before I leave. The point, your budget and the point. Nakalagay nga ba sa BBL na it's possible to have a Bangsamoro territory that's not contiguous? It's not possible for it not to be contiguous.
For the Basilan Sulutawi-Tawi, which are really not contiguous.
No, I mean, except for the islands. So, I remember reading the agreements and the possibility of having a non-contiguous territory is open in the agreements. That was closed by the BBL. I haven't read it.
Actually, Your Honor, because of the 39 barangays that voted yes, barangays in 6 municipalities in North Cotabato,
In North Cotabato.
you can actually have barangays that are not contiguous. But for all subsequent areas that may wish to join, they will have to be contiguous to the existing core
But what,
territory.
how low or how small of a unit can decide? Still a barangay?
Under the concept of geographic areas provided for in the Constitution, yes, we have operationalized that to include barangays.
If it's barangay, so if a barangay in a non-contiguous area votes to be part of this group, but it's not contiguous, even if it wins in that area, they can't be part of it.
They cannot join the plebiscite or they cannot request for a plebiscite in terms of the future if they're not contiguous to an existing area or the areas that are listed in the Bangsamoro Basin.
The 11 barangays that are non-contiguous right now,
Believe that the Congress, specifically the Congress persons covering the districts, will try to do some
Clustering.
clustering of these so that they will become
that's one.
contiguous.
Secondly, ma'am, you said a referendum. Is there a limit to the number of referenda that may be called to keep on asking the people in contiguous areas to join it?
As proposed now in the draft
No
Bangsamoro
limit.
Basic Law, there's no limit. They may ask for that so long as they meet the requirements and go through the process of a petition or
The requirement is 10%.
a petition of registered voters or an LGU resolution.
10%.
Yes, sir.
And the 10%, correct me if I'm wrong, ma'am, came from the votes that were obtained
No.
when they were first asked.
10% is like the peg for to start off a recall or a people's initiative, something. No, not so much the people's initiative, but 10% is like the baseline to start off the process or an LGU resolution.
But where did it come from, ma'am? Recall is not based on 10%, ma'am.
Uh,
No, of total registered voters. But if I remember the agreement, again, I haven't read the complete BBL. You don't even refer to registered voters. There are some baseline figures that refer to residents, not even registered voters in the agreement. How was it remedied in the BBL?
Actually, the agreement provided for qualified voters, which was corrected by the COMELEC because, a qualified voter might not be a registered voter. So in the
Precisely.
BBL, we amended that by referring to 10% of registered
So
voters.
standard in, ma'am, in all referenda or questions that will be asked, registered voters na.
Yes, sir.
Because in the agreements, I think there were some inconsistencies at that time.
It's a 10% or the LGU resolution.
Now, they can ask as often as they want every year.
Theoretically, yes, Your Honor.
But the law can further define.
And the COMELEC will have to schedule the plebiscite, whether it actually happens coinciding with regular elections or not, or for practical reasons.
Again, fine. Again,
The
last,
thinking is that they could put out the resolution at any time, but COMELEC will probably have to decide what is the in terms of
Practical time to call the
time, yes,
referendum.
to do the actual plebiscite. Will probably have to be timed with when elections are happening, but they can do the resolution anytime.
again, ma'am, our appeal, kindly make available representatives of the government as well as the MILF during our actual deliberations here, so that if there will be small changes that won't affect really the basic agreements entered into, which are rational, reasonable, and fair, for us to be able to do it without jeopardizing whatever agreements or guarantees were given by and between the two panels with each other, para mas mabilis din po. Please. Thank you very much, ma'am. Again, conditioned upon the submission of some documents requested by the chair, the proposed budget of the OPAP is hereby approved by committee and favorably endorsed to plenary for its deliberation and final approval. Congratulations, ma'am, and good afternoon.